Welcome to the What's Happening Birmingham video podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Jarvis Escott with What's Happening Birmingham. Today, I have the honor and pleasure, and first time on my podcast, the Alabama Secretary of State, John Merrill. Secretary Merrill, thank you for coming on today.
Jarvis, thanks for allowing me to be your guest.
Great. Reason why I want to bring the Secretary on, it's always an honor and pleasure to get an elected official on the podcast, but to talk about the 2020 elections amidst this, the pandemic and just it being presidential year and just a regular voting year in Alabama. So, Mr. Secretary, before we start, kind of give people a little bio about yourself.
Well, certainly. Look, I think what they really want to know is a little bit about our office. And the office of the Secretary of State of Alabama is the oldest office in the history of the state. Alabama had a Secretary of State before we were a state. In 1818, a man named Henry Hitchcock was appointed by our fifth president, James Monroe, to serve as Alabama's first Secretary of State. Now, he served ably in that role in 1818 and 1819, but on December 14th, 1819, Alabama became the 22nd state admitted to the Union. And since that time, we've had 48 individuals who served as Alabama's 53 Secretaries of State. I'm the 53rd Secretary of State. Our code and constitution give more than 1,000 assigned duties and responsibilities to the person that holds this role. Those include, but are not limited to, the things that we concentrated on the most when I was campaigning for this job back in 2013, 2014, when I put 181,351 miles on my car and 4 sets of tires, going to all 67 counties at least 2 times. Those are elections, which includes voter registration, voter participation, election administration, campaign finance reform, campaign finance review, all the things related to the elections process. And then business incorporations, licensing, trademarking. You start a new business in our state, you have to go through our office first and foremost before you can ever hire one person or pay 1 cent of tax. And last but not least, international adoptions. And we want to be responsive, respectful, and accountable to the people of Alabama. That's the reason we're concentrating on those areas.
Okay, and this year, thank you for explaining the duties of the office. I feel like a lot of times people they just think Secretary of State, all he does is administer and oversee the elections. So this year, every year in Alabama, whether it's, state governor or presidential ballot, it's never a dull moment. But this year, because of the pandemic, a lot of people are electing to do mail-in voting or absentee voting. So,
sure.
In Alabama, we are absentee voting. Can you explain to people what is absentee voting? What's the difference between that and mail-in voting?
Great question, Jarvis. Now look, there's a couple of ways to vote in Alabama, and then we'll talk about universal vote by mail in just a minute as well. In Alabama, on election day, all 1,980 polling sites will be opened on election day. So you can go to your assigned polling location in one of the 67 counties where you live. But if you'd rather vote by mail or vote absentee in person, then you can vote through the absentee process. First and foremost, you have to make the application for an absentee ballot. If you do it in person, you go to the absentee election manager's office, the circuit clerk, you complete the application, you show them your ID, they'll give you a ballot, you'll complete the process by following the instructions, return your ballot to them, they'll put it in a secured lockbox and they'll hold it there until election day. Now, if you prefer to vote by mail through the absentee process, you can download the absentee ballot application at alabamavotes.gov. It comes in a fillable PDF, which you can complete and submit to your absentee election manager, or just get a blank sheet from them or from the computer, complete it, mail it in with a copy of your valid photo ID, and then they will process it. They'll send you your ballot to the location that you requested for it to be returned. You complete your ballot, you put it in the secrecy envelope, put it in the affidavit envelope, and then return it. And when they get it and they process it, they will put it in that secured lockbox and hold it until election day. Now, Alabama is an absentee excuse state. And since we are, you have to provide a reason that you're voting absentee. And the excuse that you should use is the one that I have given all 3,655,528 voters the ability to use during this election cycle, which is the one that says, I'm ill or infirmed and will be unable to appear at my polling site on election day. Also mark the absentee ballot affidavit envelope the very same way, and then your vote will be processed accordingly and counted for the candidate of your choice.
So what are the deadlines for this year's?
Great question. Now, if you register to vote and join the 1,647,294 new voters that we've had in the last 5 years, 8 months, and 5 days, then you want to make sure you're registered by October the 19th. But if you're already registered, you have to make sure you submit your absentee ballot application no later than Thursday, October 29th. Your ballot must be returned to the absentee election manager no later than noon on election day, but it must be postmarked no later than Monday, November the 2nd.
Because I think a lot of times people think on the day of the election, they be like, well, I just mail in. Well, they're not going to count it that same day. Maybe
No, sir.
And everything. So I'm going to go back a few moments about, absentee voting and mail-in voting. On the absentee voting, and you can correct me if this is correct or not, it's more secure than the mail-in.
Well, absolutely. There is an authenticated, verified process when you vote absentee by mail, because you have to make the application. They have your name. They match your signature. They know your address. They have your ID, and then they accept your ballot and process it accordingly. In universal vote by mail, all 3,655,528 registered voters in Alabama would have a ballot mailed to them without request, and then they would process it if they chose to. That opens up for a lot of fraudulent activity or fraudulent opportunities that are not available through the absentee process.
All right, and like some people, I guess we really need to say this, because in this election time, if you get an absentee vote, you don't need to show to the polls on that day and vote twice, because that's...
No, and if you did though, Jarvis, when you got to the polls, because we've introduced new technology at the polls called the electronic poll book, and when you presented your ID, like this one, they would take your ID and they would scan it, and when they scanned it, it would show that you had already voted absentee. Your name would come up in a different color. You'd be locked out of the equipment and not be able to participate again. If you persisted, then at that point, you would be able to cast a provisional ballot, but your provisional ballot would be discarded 4 days after the election.
Okay, and a lot of times when people do provisional ballots, it's either because sometimes they'll change locations. So
that's right. And sometimes there are verifiable reasons to vote a provisional ballot. The example we just gave would be one where your vote would not count. But if you moved and you had to vote a provisional ballot, that's an example of how your ballot would count if you verified your new address to the registrars no later than the 6th of November, which is 3 days after the election. Those instructions would be given to you at your polling site on election day.
Okay, so now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, what are some preparations that your office has done to kind of ensure safety of voters? Is mask required?
Well, at the polling site, Jarvis, the thing to note is when you arrive at your polling site, all poll workers will be assigned to wear face masks or face shields or face guards. Those are provided by the state of Alabama. We also provided latex and non-latex gloves. There'll be hand sanitizer everywhere. Disinfectant spray and disinfectant wipes will be used throughout the day to make sure the place is secure. Now, voters are not required to wear face masks, but they will be provided if a voter would like to have one. They will be able to pick one up at the polling site in almost every location. But when the governor issued her executive order about face masks, she exempted voting as a standard requirement. You do not have to have a face mask when you go cast your ballot on election day.
So I like the direction we're going. So what has been some of the biggest misconceptions and about voting this year that your offices have tried to clear up?
Jarvis, the biggest problem that we have is all of the misinformation that is shared through social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, other locations on social media platforms. What we encourage people to do is to visit the Office of the Secretary of State on the phone at 334-242-7200, on the web at alabamavotes.gov, through our mobile application at Vote for Alabama, to have their questions answered by the trusted source for election information. And we are that trusted source. There are no other sources in our state or our nation that will give you verifiable information that will help you become a successful registered voter, casting your ballot for the candidate of your choice, so it will count on election day. No source other than the Office of the Secretary of State.
And I'm glad I got you on the podcast today, because another thing I want you to kind of clear up, because I feel like it's always a misconception, misinformation, is about voter ID. Hearing out, what are the most acceptable forms of voter ID at the polls?
Well, look, we have about 10 forms of ID, Jarvis, that qualify. The one I pulled out of my pocket a few minutes ago is one of those. It is the Alabama driver's license, but we also have a non-driver ID. Another verifiable form of information would be the global ID that I have, that I use for international travel. You can also use your passport. You can also use your ID card if you're a student at a university or an institution of higher learning. You also will be able to use your military ID. You can use your pistol permit in the counties that have a photo on the pistol permit. You can also use the voter ID card, which we provide for free to anyone that requests it, anytime, anywhere in the state of Alabama. There's a tribal ID. So we have like 10 different forms of ID that are all acceptable.
And can you clear this up as well, too? I feel a lot of times people say this, they don't want to vote because they feel like their license is expired, or a lot of people—
You can vote with an expired license.
Okay, I'm glad you cleared that up too. And also, it's not, because we may have conspiracy theorists out here that that's how they track you. You know, if a person is, let's just say they are, you know, may have a crime, or law enforcement may be looking for them, that they can't track you if you go to the polls that day.
Well, Jarvis, we can track you.
Okay.
Just so you know that.
Okay.
But we won't be tracking the people that are watching the podcast.
Okay. Just want to clear that up. And so any other final thoughts, Mr. Secretary, you like to add just about this?
No, but look, if anybody has any questions, Jarvis, they need to visit our website, alabamavotes.gov, call 334-242-7200, or call me on my cell at 334-328-2787. We'll make sure their questions get answered to their satisfaction. Reach out to us when it's important to them, not when it's convenient for me.
Another thing I want to add and ask you, what's the voter participation number you're kind of gauging for this year?
Oh, look, we're going to be north of 2.5 up to about 2.8 million voters.
All right.
This is going to be shattering the state record in the past, no doubt. And look, we have broken every record in the history of the state for voter registration and voter participation in the last 6 elections. So this will be the 7th one in a row.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really great. Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming on today. I know you're a very busy man. I love your bio. So you drove around the state and went through so many sets of tires. And I know you're probably even doing that now.
No doubt, Jarvis. I'm on my way to Limestone County this evening. So you got another 2.5 hours to go after we're through this afternoon.
All right. Well, I'd love for you to come on after the election, you know, kind of give you a post-interview thoughts, you know, how things are going. And of course, you're always welcome to come on. Maybe we can talk about some other topics that your office does.
Man. Just get it scheduled and we'll be good to go.
All right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Secretary. Thank you all for watching this interview. Please go out and vote Tuesday, November the 3rd.
Yes, sir.
November 3rd, Alabama. Let's pack it out like we pack out Alabama Auburn football games. So thank you all again.
Jarvis.
Yeah,
Have a
thank
great
you all
day.
for watching this video. Please check out What's Happening Birmingham for more videos, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you all again, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the What's Happening Birmingham video podcast. Please check out our website, app, or subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest videos today.